Before we get started, let's review the process in its totality to give some context to the tasks that we're going to be accomplishing to complete the PSLO assessment and closing the loop. So in the fall of 2021 through spring of 2024, faculty entered assessment data for course student learning outcomes. Then in the fall of 2024, we looked at courses that are required to earn a degree or certificate, focusing on these courses' student learning outcomes. We evaluated the degree. The PSLO supported the development of the degrees or certificates program learning outcomes, and we mapped appropriate CSLOs to PSLOs. This mapping now allows us to take the data entered for CSLO assessment and aggregate it or roll it up to serve as a proxy assessment for PSLOs. This roll-up is displayed on a data dashboard that we will use to analyze the closing the loop of each PSLO. Results and next steps will be identified and recorded in Nuventive Solutions. This mapping that we completed also serves as a visual tool that will allow us to evaluate whether students have appropriate opportunities in our programs in the courses that are required to develop the skills, knowledge, or dispositions outlined by each PSLO and at the level of mastery appropriate for the program. This tutorial will cover both of these steps, starting with the mapping evaluation. The process outlined here will be repeated for all PSLOs in the department's programs. So let's get started looking at some basic navigation features in Nuventive Solutions. Once you have opened up Solutions and gotten to your unit, if you select the hamburger on the far left, it'll open up a menu and you'll notice there's now a tab for PSLO assessment. Once you select that, you'll get a listing of all your PSLOs. So here in Public Health, we have 3 different awards and they're all listed here. Each PSLO is a separate, what we call card. So for our community health worker program, we have 4 PSLOs, each one with a separate card. Now, if you want to see a specific degree, what you can do is filter here. So let's say I want to just look at the PSLOs for the AST. I filtered here by that related degree, and now all I see are my PSLOs for Public Health AST. To remove that, simply click there. So let's start with the Community Health Worker PSLO1. If you go to the dots on the far right and say Open, it will open to reveal a new form. The first page, the first tab, lists the actual PSLO statement. You'll notice that there is another tab on the far right called Mapping Analysis and Assessment. This is where we want to begin. So select that tab, and you'll see here I'm still in that first PSLO for the Community Health Worker 1. If I then add by clicking the green circle, a form opens up, and the first thing we need to do is indicate the assessment year, which is 24-25. You'll notice the form has 2 sections. The first is mapping analysis. The second is results and closing the loop. Let's look at the mapping analysis first. So the first question asks you to identify the focus for this PSLO. So looking at the help text, it says, when considering this PSLO, what is the expected level of mastery, introduced, practiced, or developed, students would achieve as a result of meeting this PSLO? Since this is a entry-level position, I would expect that they would at least practice this skill. So we'll type that in there. And then the next thing that needs to be done is we need to review the IPD mapping. So let's take a moment to review our maps and how to analyze our mapping. You'll notice that there's a URL in the header. There's also a page in the right-hand data view that has the link. This will take us to the folder with all of the maps. So by selecting this link, holding Control, it will open a new page, and on this page we'll find all the folders that contain the maps. So let's go down to public health, since we're working in the public health area, and you'll notice here's the community health worker. So if I open that up, and again, remember I'm working on PSLO 1, and I said that I would expect students to at least practice this. I'll look to see at the different levels that the different PSLOs were associated with that PSLO. And just in general, notice that not all of the PSLOs have to be mapped to a PSLO, but you'll notice that each course has at least one PSLO mapped to at least one PSLO. And you'll also notice the different levels of association, or levels of development, levels that the PSLO supports the PSLO. And so for PSLO 1, the focus that we identified was practice, and you'll notice that we have practiced, introduced, practiced, and practiced. So we have several PSLOs that support the development of this PSLO, and they come in at the levels of introduced and practiced. So if we go back over to Solutions and look at the help text, it says to review the IPD mapping, which we just did. We need to assess the coverage of introduced, practiced, or developed and identify in the column for the PSLO. We just did that. Are there opportunities for students to identify, practice, and develop to allow them to achieve the PSLO's expected level of mastery? All right, so we just did that. We looked and we noticed that it was practiced was the focus, and that we had both introduced and practiced in the map. And so we've typed in there are both introduced and practiced levels of mastery mapped between PSLOs and PSLOs, providing opportunities for students to achieve the focus level. We're now ready to move to the next step, which is results and closing the loop. This is the step where we will look at the data that was rolled up from the PSLO assessments that were completed during the 5th cycle. In the right-hand data view, there are 2 documents, the link to the folders that we used in the prior step, and then a dashboard that says PSLO success by modality. If you open that up, you will find your PSLOs listed here. You'll have the data rolled up. It lists all the students that were assessed across all courses in the PSLOs that were mapped to this PSLO. And you can see as it goes across success, all students, and then it's broken down by modality. So what we want to do, I'm now in PSLO 1 for public health. Let's go ahead and filter so that all we see is the PSLO number 1 for public health. Here you can see that of all the students assessed in the courses in the PSLOs that were mapped to this PSLO, 97% were successful. In the traditional face-to-face, 98% were successful, and online, 70%. So there's quite a difference between online and traditional courses in terms of the success of PSLO 1. So what we need to do is look at the data and then report what we find with these drop downs. So first of all, the percent successful all students was 90%. If you look at the drop downs, that would be fully achieved. There are no students in hybrid, so let's go to online, which is 70%. If we do the drop down for online, we'll notice that that's only partially achieved. And then there are no online students, so we'll leave that one blank. We will now close the loop, and so we'll need to make a comment about the difference in terms of the online students are achieving this PSLO at a 70% rate versus 98% in the face-to-face class. So we'll make a notation of that conversation that we have within our department, and then we'll need to identify what's the plan. Maybe we need to look at the PSLOs that are mapped to that PSLO and see if there's one that's weaker for the online classes. That's a conversation you get to have within your departments, but you need to create a plan for improvement and next steps based on the assessments of this data. Once that's completed, you'll hit save and close, and then you'll repeat the process for all of the PSLOs in your program. If you have any questions, contact one of the IE coordinators. Thank you for your time.